2 of Jujutsu Kaisen! Ha-ha! Yay! Yay! Okay, here's the thing. I finished the reaction and the discussion, and I spent like an hour on that, and I thought that I'd cracked the code. I thought I'd said everything that could be said about that episode, and then I got on Discord and we started talking about the episode, and I realized Romania did not crack any codes. There was so much left unsaid, y'all, so I may have fell down the rabbit hole just a wee bit, but I just had to talk with y'all before we started episode 2. I just had to do a brief recap because it wasn't enough for Whiteboard Kun. I tried to put it on Whiteboard Kun, but he couldn't handle it. So I had to come out, and it's not much. It's not much. It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit about the ED and about Gojo and Getou and what's going on in the episode. It's just this little thing I've started for this season called the Board of Gay Yearning. And what this is essentially my little conspiracy theory board about the ED and about the episode itself and about what it means about Gojo and Getou's relationship, because I think at this point we all know Mappa and Akutami, there is no subtext. It is textual. And I will show you all with this board that I've constructed. So let's start here. I want to point out, as Shizune pointed out, something very, very crucial. You may not think it's a big deal, but July 6th, the day episode 1 came out, just happened to be National Fried Chicken Day. That's right. Do you think it's coincidence that Akutami and Mappa decided to release on Crunchyroll the first episode of Jujutsu Kaisen on the same day as National Fried Chicken, which is the well-known emblem of KFC, where the Gojo and Getou breakup took place at in the manga and in the movie? I think not! But beyond that, it's not only that, but Be Happy pointed out something very interesting, that from Gojo's perspective in the movie, the KFC breakup is gloomy and full of despair, but from Getou's perspective in episode 1, it's full of sunshine. So does that mean that Getou was okay with the breakup and Gojo's the one that's hung up on him? Is that it? Possibly, but not only that, we have the ED. Now I'm going to spend some time on the OP, I'm sure, as these episodes go on, but I don't have time right now for the OP. We've got to talk about the ED, and then we got to get into episode 2. But real quick, I want to talk about the ED before we move on, all right? Because there's some things I noticed about the ED. One, the fish. The fish that have been plaguing me for the past week, y'all. The fish that have been plaguing me. You'll notice that there's a ripple in the water that changes Getou's fish from white to black at the very start of the ED. Could this ripple be referring to the same ripple that the principal talked about? If they didn't get the girl to Tengen, it would create a ripple effect. Could that ripple change Getou's entire personality and perspective to what it is now? We'll see. The fish. We talk about the 2 beta fish that are in it. Yes, beta fish, Siamese fighting fish. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter talk about the Siamese fighting fish, and some people shared in Discord that Getou's fish is clearly this one here, and they're like, oh, that fish looks unhealthy. Nuh-uh, that's not it. No, the fighting fish here that you see is a crown tail beta. It's a specific variety of beta, and Getou's beta is a comb tail beta. Now, this is really significant because you have an albino comb tail and a Milano crown tail. A Milano is the exact opposite of the albino, is a completely pitch black fish that genetically happens, kind of like albinoism, only in reverse. Now, the crown tail does not mean that Getou is a sick fish. No, the crown tail is the most aggressive form of beta fish. It's one of the most aggressive varieties. It is not community friendly. It should be in a single species tank by itself. And if you have to put other creatures with it, they should only be bottom dwellers, which goes with Getou's entire personality of not wanting to be with anybody except those that are worse than himself, which is the opposite of Gojo. Then you have Gojo, who is a comb tail beta in this iteration. Then comb tails are more mellow than crown tails, but they are still aggressive and are highly recommended to be in tanks by themselves because they are not very good with other fish in the community. But then not only that, you have the idea that the fact that they're betas themselves, they're known for aggression and they're fighting fish. But if you research betas, you will find out that this aggression they have is a result of intense selective pressures imposed from generations of artificial selection. I can't imagine a society in this story that could possibly put pressures on two individuals with powers that would pit them against one another at some point in the story. What? Then you have the idea of the other elements of the ED, like the fact that the ED could be from Getou's perspective, whereas the OP could be from Gojo's perspective. Eerie Grimm pointed out that the OP starts out with an image of Gojo sleeping, much like the season 1 OP starts out with Yuji sleeping. But again, I'm going to save some time. We're going to add to this board as we go, but we're going to focus on the ED right now. Then you have the idea that there's a section where there's two mirrors that look kind of like Gojo's glasses in the ED. There's also Gojo with an umbrella. He doesn't need an umbrella. Gojo has infinity. Why does he need it? It's for Getou, because Getou didn't bring one and got caught in the rain. Right? Then you have the idea of the flowers, okay? There's 3 different shots of flowers throughout the ED. The first one that we see is Osmanthus kin Makurai, or as Anime Andy says, it's a flower that symbolizes nobility, truth, humility, euphoria, and first love, bitches! But that's not all. The flower that comes directly after that is the spider lily that is known in every anime to be a symbol of death. But it's not just a symbol of death. It's also a symbol of final goodbyes and abandonment. Now, this is the crucial part, right? Because you have these two directly one after the other. You have the flowers, which are shown next to the shot of Gojo and Getou's, whose hands are next to their little soda cans, like they don't want to touch hands, but they're really, really close, and there's all sexual tension, which is a metaphor for the entire first episode alone. But then you have the idea of the spider lilies coming directly after it. So you have a first love between Getou and Gojo, probably from Gojo's perspective, but if the ED's from Getou's perspective, it was a mutual first love. But then you have the idea of final goodbyes and abandonment. Does Getou believe that he's been abandoned by Gojo at some point? We don't know till we see the episodes, right? But here's the thing. There are several shots after that, and then the final flower picture, which is the hydrangea. Yeah, it goes flower, flower, span of time, other things happen, hydrangea. Hydrangeas are symbolic of gratitude and apologies. So something happened and they moved on. That KFC breakup happened and Getou moved on, but Gojo didn't. So then we have also the idea of at the very end, Gojo, Shoku waving to each other as they say goodbye. Getou, as he says goodbye, doesn't look back, just waves and goes. But then we go back to the Getou's room. We know it's Getou's room because the photo of the 3 of them, it shows him in a bare room, seems middle class, but the photo that he has of 3 of them, meaning that he's grateful for them, but he's moved on. This has been episode 1 of 24, y'all. We're not going to survive this season. We're not. It's just not possible! Well, that was weird. Sorry, y'all. As I'm Shoku tonight. I'm Shoku tonight. But man, I'm sorry for that interlude and that preview there, and we still have more comments to talk about before we start this episode, but no, I thought I'd cracked the code, and then I got on the Discord, and then what I thought was going to be like a 5-minute, like, hey, that episode was fun, turned into like a 3-hour just dive into the ED of this first episode, and I was like, oh, well, I need to do something to start out this week. But yeah, so I'm Shoku tonight, and got my hair all slicked down, and thought that we would just start episode 2 like that. Next week I'll be something different, so I already have next week planned. I'm excited for it. But yeah, so I do have some comments before we start episode 2. These are non-shippy, non-ED related comments that I want to get to before we start this episode, because it was just dense. There was just a lot to go off of last episode before we start the second one, and I wanted to get through everything so that we can start, and I feel like everything's off my shoulders. But I wanted to make a couple things known. First, Gojo in the scene against Bayer in the last episode. When I was editing, I noticed that it almost felt like Megumi, like Fushiguro, when he was on the top of the mound of delinquents in season 1, that same like middle school delinquent vibe. That's how I felt Gojo was when he was facing off against Bayer, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then Getou, at the start, we didn't even talk about this last episode, but that opening scene where Getou is, he's talking about how he realized that this situation wasn't uncommon. There's a shot of someone leading 2 little kids through a field, and I was like, is that Getou leading the 2 girls away that he had in the movie with him? Is that what that is? I'm like, oh, interesting. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I wonder if we're going to tie back to that. But in addition, Anime Annie pointed out that the way that they hold the phones, it's a very 2000s thing, and that back then you didn't have speakerphone on your cell phones. I was around in those times. You didn't have speakerphone, so you turned the volume up on your phone and you just held it out so you could hear it, and that was your speakerphone. So that's why they're doing it in that scene. I love that little attention to detail. It's great. Be Happy noticed, as well as Vizu Supreme noticed that apparently there's supposed to be a break after whenever this arc is finished. I don't want to know anymore. Be Happy made them edit their comments, not tell me exactly when it's going to happen. I know there's going to be some kind of break. It's fine. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I don't like knowing that stuff ahead of time. I like it just happening and then me be like, oh, what a surprise. And then that happens. So I don't want to know, and Be Happy is going to be checking the comments and moderating to make sure that doesn't end up coming up. But yeah. And so Sarah Linda talked about how in season 1, and several other people pointed this out as well, that Tengen is mentioned as the person in season 1 that makes the barriers around the Jujutsu school, and also that could have been fooled by Hanami in season 1. Now, Sarah Linda was saying that they thought that Gojo wasn't really arguing, or Getou wasn't arguing with Gojo, that he really doesn't believe what the society is saying in that whole basketball scene. I kind of disagreed with Sarah Linda. I do think that Getou, whether or not, because Getou gets upset when Gojo just blatantly is like, oh, the weak, why are we facing them? They're weaklings, they're normies. And Getou kind of gets mad about it. So I feel like if Getou really didn't at least somewhat believe in the society that he's upholding, that he wouldn't have been so vehemently opposed to Getou in that scene. But again, they're going to end up opposing each other throughout this entire series, so it's fine. I mean, we can all figure out how it goes as we go per episode. And then, did Getou grow up poor? I talked about in that wild rambling at the start of this that there is a shot of Getou's bedroom, and it looks fairly like middle class, like nothing special, but nothing, nothing that looks impoverished. So I don't know. I'd be curious to know more about Getou's upbringing. Gojo strikes me as the rich boy that grew up with the silver spoon in his mouth, but if Getou was the polar opposite, it would be kind of interesting with their philosophies. That could be really, really cool. And then, Boo Boo says that Boo Boo, and like several other people said this too, but Boo Boo was the first one, so they get dibs. Said that Getou in the episode, the reason why he tells Gojo to speak more politely is because Gojo is speaking to everyone in the ore tone, which is very informal, and he's supposed to do it in the boku. And what's funny is when we actually see him in season 1 in the present, he's speaking in the boku tone instead of ore. So he took Getou's words to heart in the end. I don't know. The KFC breakup scene was gloomy from Gojo's perspective, but it was sunny from Getou's. So what do we do with that? And then Wim talks about how Getou is trying to put responsibility on himself to uphold the world that protects the weak and creates a place for the Jujutsu Kaisen sorcerers, which is funny because Megumi doesn't do that. We were talking about how the trios, we're talking in the Discord about the trios of Getou, Gojo, and Shoku do not match up with Nobara, Yuji, and Megumi. And I think it's really important to note that Getou is trying to uphold this society that dictates a certain way that sorcerers are supposed to act. Whereas we saw in season 1, Megumi was like, I'm doing this for selfish reasons. I'm saving Yuji because I think it's right and it's a personal thing. And Gojo was like, all right. Like Gojo realizing that Megumi is not like Getou. I like that. I think that's really cool to note. So thank you for bringing it up, Wim. Anime Annie also says that Gojo gives off Almine vibes from Kroko's basketball, and that the only one who can beat me is me, and maybe my gay lover. And then Gojo used the same technique to crush the can in episode 1 last week as he used with Yuji in season 1. That was a good callback. And finally, Jin notes that in the Jujutsu Kaisen movie, Getou has said that he ate over 6,000 cursed spirits, which is quite a lot. And we talked about the idea that it was like a taste of duty that he had to do. The music that Urahime and Mei have playing when they're walking in circles is the same as Cursed Womb Must Die from season 1, and was one of their favorite OST tracks, which is why they brought it up. And apparently, we talked about Chainsaw Man and the whole hotel similarity scenes from episode 1. Apparently, the Chainsaw Man chapter came out 3 to 4 months before this happened in Jujutsu Kaisen. So my headcanon is that Gege and Fujimoto were sitting like in a bar one night and they were like, hey, do you like The Shining? I like The Shining. Wouldn't it be cool if in our manga we referenced The Shining? And then they both found ways to do it. So so much. The first episode was so dense. There's just so much happening. I'm like, what do we even do with this? There's just so much going on. And I have a feeling it's going to be like this every week. We were talking in the comments. We're like, we're not going to survive. So, as you can see last week and from that intro, I got a little crazy too. So, but y'all, I'm so ready. This intro has gone on long enough. I don't see the reason to go on any further. So, we're not going to waste any more time. But, oh my gosh, y'all. I've waited all day. I had to work today. I had training today. It's been a long ass day. It's like 9 o'clock at night. I don't care. I'm ready to watch Jujutsu Kaisen and see what the hell we're going to get with this episode. So I hope y'all are excited because I definitely am. So we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive into Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, Episode 2. One quick thing before we started. We talked about the hidden inventory. That's what I was going to bring up. Hidden inventory being the episode name. In the last episode, I didn't really know in the discussion how to kind of what that meant. I thought about it being twofold in this episode. We'll see what happens with it. But one is like hidden inventory. If Getou takes the two little girls later on, that could be a hidden inventory. Could also refer to the girl that Getou and Gojo are supposed to apprehend. But also hidden inventory could refer to Getou eating all the cursed spirits, and he has this hidden inventory inside of him that you can't see. Just want to put that out there. So, we're going to start this episode of Jujutsu Kaisen, episode 2 of season 2. Oh my god! And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. Oh my god. Let's freaking do this, y'all. So Gojo makes my brain hurt. For a lot of reasons. And this is as close to a cigarette as Shoku's getting. And now we're gone. So I won't choke on it while I talk to y'all. Yeah, I had to go ahead and fill Whiteboard Kun out because this episode I have a feeling for the next at least several weeks, it is going to be just density. Just all the density you want. And I'm like, Gege Akutami, I do not need math brought into my shonen battle manga, damn it. We're going to talk about that, but holy cow. So, this episode came out of nowhere and had lots of things going on that I was like, wait, what are we doing? So we need to talk about it. There are several things on the board. I think the two most notable things on the board, though, are Gojo Satoru, as Getou would call him, Daddy Fushiguro, although deadbeat daddy might be the better term for it. Maybe not. We'll talk about that. And then the others. This episode, oh my gosh. Fushiguro, Daddy Fushiguro is fascinating. I am kind of obsessed with him and everything about him. He is so intriguing. So, we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about Gojo. We're going to talk about the whole episode. Don't worry. I know I wrote a lot on Whiteboard Kun, but I had to keep my thoughts straight because when they started explaining Gojo's technique, I was like, what are we doing with my life? And then going back, we'll talk about it, but I was like, Gege, why? And I know that there are some reactors out there that are like all into like battle stats and like all this. I am not one of those, as you may have noticed. So I'm gonna try to apply it the best I can. But Gojo and Daddy Fushiguro are two of the most fascinating characters right now. And there's little things with Getou that are interesting. Riko is interesting. Kurai is interesting, or Kuroi. We're gonna talk about them. But yeah, so this opening scene with the tea and Getou torturing the Q member for information. We just had to make note of Getou displaying some early methods of torture right off the bat, right? And he's not doing anything. I mean, him and Gojo are just trying to get information, right? But when you go to the image of Gojo on the phone, Gojo just knocked Bayer out. Gojo was like, I couldn't find any info, bop, and just knocked him out. But Getou was willing to take his time and use the cursed manipulations, the cursed spirits, to get information from him and was torturing the Q member. So I'm like, okay. So we're getting like little tiny hints that Getou maybe has always had these tendencies. He's just not been showing them to Gojo or anybody else because Riko and Kuroi are passed out during all of this. I guess Kuroi just happened to be in the apartment with Amane. I guess that was it. I don't know. I like just the weird, like, for us, the audience, we know how Getou ends up. So seeing him torture this Q member, we're like, oh my god, this is like leading to where he's going to be later. But it's kind of like this dark humor in the moment because he's like, what are you talking about? As he's like having his tea. And the guy's like, I'll retire to the countryside. I swear I'll do all these things. And Geto's like, you can't curse. Jujutsu sorcerers are not good farmers. It's like, haha. So yeah, then we have the OP. But before we get to the OP, we have to go to the racetrack. The racetrack with the boats, okay? I had to go back and like get all of this down because one thing that this season is doing amazingly is giving us all of this information while dialogue is happening. And I can just imagine if you read the manga, you're able to sit there and look at the panels and digest it all and soak it all in. Whereas in the anime, it's so fast paced, we don't have time to stop and let you soak it in. So I had to go back and write all this stuff down as we talk. So we're at the boat races, which is a funny little like jaunt. Instead of horse races, we're at boat races. And we see the inside numbers 1 through 6. Now, I had to go back and look at the tickets, right? Because old daddy Fushiguro is looking at the tickets. And he has the same, like, this is the third race of the day. And when we see him in the restaurant, which that whole scene is a scene we're going to talk about. But when we see him again in the restaurant, it's the 5th race. So we're going to talk about Daddy Fushiguro and his possible gambling addiction. But he's got the 3rd race ticket there, and then he's betting on racer 3. He's betting on the 3rd racer. So I don't know if he's got like a special interest in the number 3. I don't know if that's a thing, but he keeps betting on number 3 in all the races. He's betting on that one. And he just has this like, there's a sleaziness to him that, but here's the thing. I've seen that OP. I've seen the Dorito-shaped body that this man has. He's wearing these damn sweatpants, so at one point he's gonna rip it off and we're gonna be like, oh my god. Like, I'm waiting for it. I know it's gonna happen. I'm waiting for it. I know it's gonna happen. I like, Gege is like tapping into every possible like clothing fashion fetish we could possibly do in this series because we have this, and then it's been shared in the Discord, this picture of Getou with like his harem pants with stirrup feet, and there's a belt over the harem pants for no apparent reason, but everybody's obsessing over them. I'm like, Gege, what are we doing? I'm here for it, but what are we doing? So yeah. So we get Daddy Fushiguro here saying, what are you doing after suddenly disappearing on me? And then he shows up and he's like, oh, you're here at the race. He's like, I'm getting more money. But he's not good at it. And he's like, I've never seen you win once. I absolutely love the actual face, the expression that Daddy Fushiguro makes in this is hilarious. It's a very Megumi face. Like, I swear I've seen Megumi make that face once before with Yuji. I swear. But he says, what about your job? And he's just like, oh, give it a rest. You're talking like I'm unemployed. And he's like, well, you are unemployed. As a mediator, it's my duty to report how the job's going to the client. And so I guess the client is whoever is the Star Religious Organization because they've hired him for $30 million with the deposit. And as the mediator, this guy's like, okay, I need to know how things are going because they gave you $30 million that you're piddling on these horse races or these boat races. I need to know what's going on. So that's when Daddy Fushiguro reveals he knows quite a lot. He knows Gojo's family, which we know from season 1. Gojo said that him and the Zenins are related. The Gojos and the Zenins are related. They're the big legacy, right? They're related. They're the Jujutsu Kaisen legacy, apparently. And he knows the family's techniques. He's like, I'm up against the Gojo clan's kid. Now, we've never seen any other Gojos. Does he still have family? Is he an orphan? Is his family like secluded and isolated? Like, what is the deal? What is their deal? Why have we not seen any other Gojos? Why is it just Satoru? But he knows about the family techniques, and he says, I can't go up against Gojo like this. He's like, that's not how this is gonna work. We have to wear him down first. He's like, you can't just go up against a monster right out of the gate. You have to wear him down and then go for the kill. Daddy Fushiguro is very smart and knows a strategy. He knows how to whittle someone down, right? But it's so fascinating because he's kind of sleazy, and it's such an interesting contrast because you have Gojo who puts on the air of, yes, Getou and I are the strongest. Yet I'm elite. Yes, maybe he's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Like, Gojo has just this elitist air to him right now as this teenage brat. And Fushiguro for being like bored of the Zenin clan, he's like sitting here in flip-flops and sweatpants at a sleazy racetrack betting on boats. Like, that does not seem like, it seems like the furthest thing from anything elitist or of legacy like the Zenins. So I'm very curious to know why he took his wife's name, why he left the Zenin clan, why he hates them. I feel like he's not elitist at all. He's just kind of like, fuck it. So he's just like, this is his way of getting out, which is so fascinating because then you have Maki Zenin. Maki wants to become the leader of the Zenin clan, and she wants to like inherit it and reform it, whereas Fushiguro was just like, screw it, I don't need you all, and just left. We'll get into that though. He's like, I can't just go up against the clan members. I have to whittle them down and use some idiots first, which is where the bounty's gonna come in. He's like, go do your own damn job. He's like, I already did. So he set up the bounty. He's like, what were you thinking letting go of the entire deposit? So I had to go back and think about this. But basically, he took the $30 million he got from the Star Religious Organization as the deposit for getting the girl and killing her. And he has put it down as a bounty to attract all of these other curse users and say, hey, here's $30 million. If you can kill her, I'll give you $30 million. And that's the incentive to get them to wear down Gojo first. They're like, oh yeah, we'll just get these other no-names to come in, wear him down, just get him by the bulk, and then when Gojo's exhausted, I'll just swoop in and do the job and get it over with. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I don't have to exert a lot of energy. I'm an old guy in my sweatpants and flippy floppies. Ain't got time for that. So yeah, it's interesting. But he says, I told you I'm wearing him down. All that money will come back to me, just like with this race. But he's not successful at all at the racing. Because when they go through the thing, he says number 6 crosses the line first, then number 1, and then third is number 2, and 4th is number 4, and 5th is number 3. And that's when the mediator says, you're not cut out for making easy money. Like, things aren't going to, you're not going to get the easy route with anything. That's why he says, he's like, that's why you have the rep as a sorcerer killer. So, I find that fascinating because, like, for Gojo, for example, everything seems to come easy for him. He's got these amazing techniques, which we'll talk about. Everything seems to come easy for Gojo, and he doesn't have to really, he applies himself, don't get me wrong. He applies himself, he works hard, but he seems like he has literally the silver spoon born in his mouth. Whereas Fushiguro, he bets on these races, but they're not really, it's not worth it. I feel like the mediator's saying, you're not cut out for like the easy life. You're made for the hard road, but you're tough. You can do it. But Fushiguro's like, I know I can, but why would I want to put up that much effort? Why would I want to exert that much when I can just have somebody else do it? It's such an interesting contrast. I really, really like it. So then he talks about like with the races and everything, and he says, I'm counting on you, Sorcerer Killer. And that face that Daddy Fushiguro makes when he says Sorcerer Killer, he's just like, it's a very Megumi face. And that's when he brings up Megumi. He says, oh, right. How's Megumi doing? This random mediator knows who his son is. Is he his godfather? Was he there when he was born? Does he know the wife? Is he the wife's brother? How does he know about Fushiguro's kid? But he knows about the Zenin clan, so maybe he knows when Megumi was born, maybe it was announced. How does he know this? And then the way that Fushiguro answers, and he goes, oh, it was very Zeke. He goes, who's that? I'm like, bitch, please. Bitch, please do not who's that. You know exactly who that is. So, the question is, of course, is Daddy Fushiguro a deadbeat dad? Or does he act like a deadbeat dad because he doesn't want anything happening to his son? Or is it both? Is he Kenny from AOT or is he actually just, it wouldn't surprise me if he's a sleazy dad, but you would think if he was sleazy, he'd be like, oh, who cares? But instead he's like, who's that? Meaning I'm separating myself from my son. I'm not acknowledging my son. I know I'm doing dangerous things. I know I'm involved in a not so good lifestyle. I don't want my son involved in that. Whatever. And maybe that's how Gojo ends up with him. I want to know how Gojo ends up with Megumi of all kids. How that is going to go. I'm assuming we'll find out at some point in this series. It might not be anytime soon, but I'm assuming we'll find out. why he ended up with his kid of all things. But yeah, he acts like he doesn't know his kid. I'm thinking the wife's not alive at this point. I'm like, you would think that he seems to like his wife a lot because he took her name. He seems to think a lot of her. And I mean, if she's willing to get with him, although, look at him, I can understand why. He ain't around a lot, but when he is, you know, I just feel like maybe his wife's dead and Megumi is off with someone somewhere, out of sight, out of mind, and he's safe, and that's how Fushiguro wants to keep it. So when he says, who's that? He's like, let's not bring up my son because, you know, I'm dealing with $30 million bounties, star plasma vessels, life and death situations. Now's not the time for me to think about my kid. So I'm just, I'm so fascinated by him, right? And then we get the OP. I don't want to talk too much about the OP because we haven't even gotten into Nanami or any of these other characters yet. We barely have seen Shoku. It's mainly been Getou and Gojo's show at this point. But guys, y'all, seeing Toji, he's got these sweatpants on. The moment he rips off that sweatshirt and there's a skin tight Dorito shaped torso here, I'm just needing this. And we saw from Getou and his fight scene in this episode, this animation is going to work very well with it. I'm actually really pleased with the animation in it. I very much am. I'm very much happy, and my dogs are like little cursed techniques at my feet right now, let me tell you. So yeah, so let's get back to Riko here. I did want to make notice, I said it in the reaction, but when Gojo lifts his hand down over his face at the very end, it's like when he's doing the hollow purple technique, and I don't know what to do with that. I'm just so interesting. So we find out Shoko can use, I keep saying Shoku. Shoko can use a reverse curse energy and heal things. I love her explanation where she's like, what, like it's hard? Like she explains it to them. She's like, oh, you just do the flu, hyoi. Get it? I love that. I think that's hilarious. Where she's like, what, can you guys not do it? And they're both like, nope. Oh, okay. Several things with Gojo in this episode. One, I love Riko because she is one. I feel like Gojo elicits two responses. Either you're just horny on main for him, like the girls in the seminary and the teacher, or you just slap him in the face and you're like, get away, creepy Furby. Like, I feel like those are the two responses. There is no middle ground. You are either 100% horny on main for it, or you're like, Gojo's a creepy Furby, kill it with fire. Those are your two opposing ends. There's nothing in the middle. There's no hope. So, I love that Riko's just like, ew, get away from me. Like to Gojo for all reasons. That's just absolutely hilarious. And Getou's like, I like her. I love it. I love the Getou's like, now calm down, Riko. I mean, he is creepy, but let's be real. We're not the group that attacked you. And then we have Kuroi. And I just love that she's like, you have the face of a liar. Your bangs are weird too. And he's like, quit making fun of me. And so then, yeah, I like that Kuroi is not at all, she's not at all worried about the cursed spirit that she's riding on top of that's super creepy. Kuroi could care less. She's not really worried about it at all. What's funny about this entire scenario is that any other shonen would try to be like pairing up Kuroi with Getou and Riko with Gojo, but Gege was like, oh god no, Gojo and Getou are totally gay for each other. They don't have time for these ladies. I love it. I love that all these girls are attracted to Gojo, and Gojo's just like, I am hot. Yes, but I'm not attracted to any one of you. It's great. It's wonderful. I will say this. We talked about the members of Q, which it does not escape me that Q and Quincy from Bleach, same first letter. I know that their designs are very similar. I will say, too, there is a Quincy in Bleach who is dressed like a maid and is tied to one of the main characters. And I'm like, Gege, are you basing her character off of that Quincy from Bleach? Are you basing it off of her? It seems like you are. I'm okay with it, but it's just, it's a very big coincidence, right? Of all designs, of all character designs. And so Getou explains his technique, and that's when Gojo is interrupted by Riko, and she says, a commoner's way of thinking. I am stunned that Riko, Amane making me think of Toilet Bound Hanago-kun, but Amane Riko is totally fine with assimilating with Tengen. I was like, oh. Because I thought going into this episode, oh, this girl has no clue what's happening. She's not going to want to do this. She's going to be totally against it. I was like, she's going to fight them tooth and nail this entire journey. Oh, no. She's on board. Girl's down to assimilate with Tengen. I don't think she fully realizes what is going to happen once she's assimilated, because Getou explains it later, and I'm like, that doesn't seem like anything she's really considered too detailed. But she seems fine with it, and she says, Tengen-sama is me, and I am Tengen-sama. She looks at it with the glass half full perspective of, oh, well, yeah, Tengen-sama is going to assimilate me, but I am going to assimilate Tengen-sama. She's kind of in the mindset of, when we assimilate, I'm going to be the dominant personality, and he's going to become part of me. Which, yeah, that's kind of what's going to happen. He is going to absorb into her body. So yeah, who's to say that she's not going to merge with him and become this new thing? I'm getting like Hunter Chimera Ant vibes with it, even though I've not finished that whole arc. But what I've seen of it, I'm like, this is kind of like that. So I'm really surprised at her glass half full perspective about it. But I don't think she fully realizes, as Getou notes later, the extent of what it's going to be like. And the moment that he kind of reveals like what ends up happening, and again, we'll talk about Bleach in a minute, I'm like, I don't know if she's fully realized what this is going to entail. So I guess they basically, from what I understand, it sounds like they've told her from the start, you're the star plasma vessel. When it comes time, you're going to merge with Tengen and become this pillar being that's, you know, protecting all of Jujutsu Kaisen sorcery. And she's just like, okay. I mean, I guess the opposing way of thinking of it is you're going to die. So she's like, I'm not going to die. I'm just going to become immortal. I'm just going to combine with this other being and basically be immortal. I mean, if you look at it that way, I guess it's not so creepy. I guess that's one way of making the best of the situation that's handed to you. If life gives you lemons, make lemonade, right? And so they're just kind of like, okay, she's like, it's my will, my heart, my soul will continue to live on after assimilation. Cool. Good for her. I'm glad she thinks of it that way. And then these two boobs aren't even like acknowledging her. And she's like, I hate you. I'm going back to my seminary school. And she's so obsessed with the school that she goes back to it, which when you find out later, you know, she kind of knows that she's on a ticking time clock. She wants to spend the last moments with her friends. And Getou says, yeah, after she assimilates, she's going to basically go to the basement of the Jujutsu Kaisen school and be the barrier of it. Which gave me, again, with Bleach, very similar vibes to a current arc of Bleach that's happening right now on TV. And some of the plot lines kind of align similarly to that. And we can comment about it down below if you want to. If you're a Bleach fan and you know where the story's going, I'm like, that seems very similar to a plot line in that series. But Kuroi's worried that she's going to miss her friends and wants to help her spend as much time with them as she can. And we find out she doesn't have any family. Conveniently, she doesn't have any family that are going to miss her. Because that was something I was wondering too. I'm like, what is her family going to think about her just disappearing? She doesn't have any. So imagine that. They all died mysteriously under mysterious circumstances. Imagine that. And so one thing that is really cool is that Getou also can tell something that's nice, like we find out plot-wise and power-wise, when the curses that he ingests, when they're exorcised, he can sense it. So they become part of him, and he can sense when they're gone. So that's when he knows that she's in danger, because the cursed spirits he sent to watch over her disappear. So yeah, I'm just amazed that Riko is her attitude. She's really spunky. I like her character a lot. She's definitely a character that fits well with following Gojo around and dealing with his bizarreness, because she seems like she can handle it. It's fascinating, right? I do like the pool scene. I like the pool scene where Getou's like, why do we have to do all of these things? And they're like, it's an order from Tengen. And Gojo's just like, he kicks the pool water that's dirty. Like, I don't want to do it. Gojo's such a brat. But it's so interesting because I feel like Gege is setting Gojo up to be this brat who always gets what he wants, etc. And then later, when bad things happen and he breaks up with Getou and goes through all of his angsty period, he's going to be forced to grow up. And then he's going to spend his adult life trying to be a kid again. You know. And so then we have the whole situation with Riko and her friends, which goes back to the ED and the OP. And then Geto's like, so if her family are dead and you're with her, then you're her family. And Kuroi's like, I guess you could say that that's kind of the case. I guess that that's it, right? That's at least what we're led to believe. And so then they're like, I wish I could share my senses with the cursed spirits like Mei-san does. So Mei can control spirits. That's cool. She can share her senses with them, which we've seen back in season 1, that power was being used. Okay, the moment that we go back to the restaurant scene, can we talk about the restaurant scene and break that down? Can we analyze that scene for a hot second with Daddy Fushiguro? Because it is such a gross scene. Everything about it is grotesque, but it is so freaking fascinating. So we're back to the boat races, right? We're back to the boat races. And so the restaurant, there's this focus on everything is gross. Like we've seen Getou eating the cursed spirits, right? And the Getou eats the cursed spirits, and they're like, he describes it as like vomit and shit. It's disgusting. Then we go to this restaurant that's just like this rundown diner. Like when he gets the tea out of the thing, it's just like an old grisly gas station. You can see, like, you can feel the grunge and the dinge on everything. But the kebab that he eats looks disgusting. The little Tokiyami food that he's eating is like, it's just the way he picks it up, it's just like gross and pungent and pudgy and like pus. It's very weird, right? And he keeps on betting on the boat races. So I'm like, does Daddy Fushiguro have a gambling addiction? He might, because he keeps betting and he keeps losing. So he might have a gambling addiction. That could be something that he has. But also, things around him, they don't go well. Like the greasy food, and then when he breaks the chopsticks, they're not broken evenly, they're broken mix-matched, which is a bad luck sign, right? Like it's bad luck. And then he keeps losing the bets. When he bets on the same boat, he keeps losing. And then the mediator is concerned that he's not going to get his money back. The mediator's like, hey, we put this bounty out, but like there's handler's fees and there's like all these other fees associated with the bounty. So, you know, if any of these bounties actually get to her before you do, we're screwed. And Fushiguro's like, no, we're fine. I got this. And the funny thing is that he gets worried that the Star Religious Group is going to question the mediator for getting them to hire Fushiguro. It sounds like the mediator and Fushiguro are working together like as scammers, which is like con artists, which is hilarious because Fushiguro's voice actor, well, Getou's voice actor plays Reagan, so I guess it's not too crazy with the VAs. But it almost seems like the mediator and Fushiguro are like con artists, and they're scamming these groups out of all this money, and the mediator's like, hey, should we maybe like stop them? Because what if they do kill Gojo and the girl and take them, and then we're gonna be out all this money? And Fushiguro's like, no, we're fine. We got this. We're wearing them down. I've got a plan. Don't worry. But all of Fushiguro's plans seem to go wrong, so I could see why the mediator's a little bit concerned, right? And so the thing about it is, everything about this scene is absolutely fascinating. Like the TV's going at the exact same time. We do these weird focuses on Fushiguro's like mouth and the stuff dripping from it. And he's just watching the race. Like he expects everything. There's this weird grungy insanity to Fushiguro, where insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting different results. And he keeps on doing the same bet on the same boat over and over again, and it's not working. So I'm like, is that like a subtle sign that he's kind of insane? Maybe. And the broker is just sitting there waiting, being like, oh my God, we have 48 hours. We have 47 hours left to get to this girl. And otherwise, we're going to lose our money. What are we going to do? And they're like, where is Amanai? And they all split up. They go to the chapel, the music room, and the two unknowns. And we see that Amanai did not want them to follow her. So we go back to the boat races. And at first, he's like, the ones drawn to the bounty are just fools. And he's like, we got this. They're going to just wear themselves out. They're basically working for us for free. And I love the idea that you have the glass, the like water glass that's empty. And you see the reflection of Fushiguro and the reflection of the TV in the glass. It's very artistic. It's very cool. And then that's when the mediator's worried about him and the deposit. And the race starts to go Fushiguro's way. Number 3 starts to pull ahead and win the race. And this is where things get really interesting, right? So the moment that number 3 starts to pull in front, which is the one that he bet on, It's like Fushiguro comes alive. It's like the moment things start to go his way, he thinks that everything is going to turn out all right. Like his confidence is entirely based on how the bet is going to go. He almost acts like Midorima from Kuroko's Basketball, where as long as his horoscope is in line, nothing will go wrong. And so the moment that like he starts to see number 3's winning, he starts to be like, okay, no, things are going in motion. We got this. But then he turns around when he sits up from the table, and the first thing that happens is he knocks the guy over, knocks the noodles down, and they break everywhere. And instead of offering to pick up the noodles, instead of apologizing, instead of anything, he just like goes and gets his tea, gets in the guy's face like, you got a problem? The guy gets freaked out and he steps on the noodles with his nasty flip-flops, drags his feet through the noodles, doesn't pay it any mind, sits back down, and that's when the boat starts losing, and it's like his confidence instantly drops again. And he's like, oh, no, but gotta keep working. I didn't get what I wanted. I gotta keep trying again. It's just like, it is so fascinating to me that there's this level of not concern, but obsession at the same time. And there's just something not right. But what's so funny is that when you compare it to Gojo, for Gojo, everything seems to go his way. Like, Gojo just gets to experiment with his powers because he has all this amazing stuff happening around him. And Fushiguro, everything's going wrong, but he somehow is making it work. And I'm like, I'm so drawn into Fushiguro's character, and I want to know more about who is he, what is his background, why is he like this, what's his technique, what is going on, is he able to like make bad luck work for him? Which would be, if his technique involves bad luck and Gojo has all this good luck, do they counterbalance each other? I don't know. But he gets kind of concerned, and he's like, oh, don't worry, Gojo's with the girl. And this is when he drops this. He's the first in several centuries to possess the 6 eyes and the limitless technique. So yeah, the first in several centuries to possess the limitless and 6 eyes. So that means, one, that there have been Gojos in the past that have had the same pairing of techniques. That Gojo is like a genetic anomaly. He is the designer dog that his family's been waiting for all this time, and here he is. I can't imagine they put Gojo up on any kind of pedestal or anything because of that, right? It seems like because Fushiguro is related to Gojo distantly, he knows all the family tea, and he's like, oh yeah, they treated him very special because he's like the perfect baby. Like, he came out with his doll eyes and white hair and was perfect. And he's like, yeah, he's going to be strong and there's not much we can do about it. It's like fate, right? So that's interesting. The crazy thing too is that the one bad guy, the guy that can make clones of himself, he asks Gojo to explain what I think is the 6 eyes, and Gojo doesn't do it. He gives us the explanation of infinity instead. And I'm like, you son of a bitch. How dare you? So yeah, the limitless power is what Gojo also calls infinity, I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong, don't tell me. Let me be in ignorance. And in the 6 eyes, we don't get any explanation yet for the 6 eyes. He kind of hints at it showing his glasses, but we don't really get any explanation. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. But yeah, he's like, he has the 6 eyes and the limitless technique. And no one can kill the star plasma vessel as long as he's nearby. Again, everything is really gross. Like the Tokiyami he's messing with is sickening. And that's when he notices that the boat that he bet on is losing. And he's just like, well, things are in motion. I gotta go, right? And I love that the mediator's like, get that 30 million back for me, please. And he's like, no. He's like, it's fine. He's like, I gotta go. And that guy's like, what a bastard. And he's just like, signals down, I gotta go. Bye. So then we have Getou versus the one guy that is maybe working for the Star Religious Group. We think he's working for Q because he's a cursed user. And so far we think the Star Religious Group doesn't have any cursed users, but maybe they do because they hired Fushiguro. At this point, they're all coming out of the... Here's the thing. Getou and Gojo are just now learning about the bounty. So at first, Getou is trying to figure everything out. He thought that maybe maybe this guy was working for Q or the Star Religious Group, and fighting him, he realizes, oh no, you're just a dude that's after the bounty on Riko. There's multiple players involved now. We're not just dealing with 2 organizations. It's spread beyond that. So that's making things more problematic, is what he's realizing. So what I like is that this guy, in classic battle shonen ways, this old man, he's like, I know exactly his weakness. He must not be good at close combat because he's using a wide range assault technique. And then Geto's like, no, actually, I'm fine fighting you in close combat. I'm actually okay. I was just, I just didn't want to fight you close because you're like an old man, whatever. I love it. I love that, again, Gege is like looking at the battle shonen trope and is like, actually, no. I just didn't want to do it. So it's really fun. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, I love the animation. The animation on the close combat is really good with this animation style. It looked more like season 1 a little bit. So I was like, okay, all right, show. I'm on board. I'm here for it. And then the whole thing with the dog appearing, and the fact, the dark humor of him seeing Tasuke, his dog that he hasn't seen for 50 years, and the fact that it was representation of his life flashing before his eyes, I was like, Gege, what are you even doing? Stop. It was so good. But then that's not where it ends. That's not even the best part. The best part is that he's like, okay, we see Gojo running into the church choir where Riko is, and all of the girls instantly become the Jujutsu Kaisen fandom. They instantly freak out for Gojo, which, if you didn't know, I'm a Nanami girl personally, and maybe a Daddy Fushiguro girl, so I'm like, Gojo's fine. I'm not going gaga for Gojo and his creepy Furby doll eyes. No, you all can have him. You can have him in his lanky, tall body. But I will say, there's a lot of the Juju stroll where he was doing the thing in the shirt with Megumi and being the violin teacher, and Megumi's like, what the fudge? It was remnants of Juju stroll from there, and it was very Oikawa from Haikyuu where he was doing the pose, his hand on his hip, cocking his hip to the side. Ladies, look, I hate to break this to you, but if a man cocks his hip to the side like that and does that pose, you don't really have a chance with him. He has someone else, and he has something that you won't have. So, just saying, I don't know a lot of guys that do. And they're like, why are your eyes blue? I love they ask why his eyes are blue. That's something weird. They should be asking why is his hair white. I'd be asking about his hair, not his eyes. And then, God, Gojo, you're ridiculous. And Riko's like, you are absolutely awful. Because Riko has blue eyes, so why'd they even ask? And God, the teacher, though, look, I probably would not ask for Gojo's number, but when she's like, here's my phone number. When she said, it's hard for a teacher to find love, I'm like, girl, I relate. Can relate. I'm just like, oh my God. I was living for her. I could cosplay as her. But yeah, so they managed to get out of there. And then, so I feel like Gojo has done this technique with his hand grabbing Yuji before in season 1. I feel like it's happened. I feel like he's grabbed Yuji before in season 1 and tossed him or did something and used that same technique. But she's floating and he's holding her. And it's not that she's floating, it's that he's using his technique to kind of alter the spatial dimension to make it to where he's it's almost like he's sucking her up like a black hole into his hand, right? That's infinity. It's like he's sucking her up into a black hole in his hand. He's gathering things towards him, but at the same time creating a barrier that you can't actually touch him. And then red is a spreading out of that barrier, and it doesn't quite work, right? I like that he's still... One thing I really like about this flashback with Getou and Gojo is that they're still in high school. They're still developing their techniques. They haven't perfected them like they do as adults, which I really like that the show is doing that, right? Oh my God. And then we have this weird guy with the eye cut out that has the bag over his head. What? I feel like Gege's like, this seems like a good technique. And so I love that Kuroi can defend herself with the broom. What a badass. I love her. She's great. And then Getou's like, here, I'll help you. Where's Riko? She's gotten into trouble. And they realize it's a clone. And Getou's like, oh, crap, there's a bounty. And now all these sorcerers are going to come after you. So here's the thing. Gojo explains his technique. And I had to write it down here. He explains, because the one guy's like, how do you know my technique? Gojo doesn't really answer the question. He completely skirts around it. I think that the 6 eyes that he has is an ability that allows him to see what people's techniques are and can determine his techniques and determine their weaknesses. He basically is Almine and Akashi from Kuroko's Basketball put together. That's not fair. That's not fair! And then you have the red of Akashi and the blue of Almine. It comes together and makes hollow purple. That's OP as hell, and it's not fair. No. But yeah, he doesn't explain what the 6 eyes technique are. He kind of just completely ignores that question because he doesn't want to answer it. But I think it's just a technique that allows him to see what the moves and techniques of others are and learn how to exploit their weaknesses, which is OP as fudge. But that's not the technique that gets explained. Instead, he talks about, he says he has good eyes. That's all he says. And then he talks about limitless or infinity. And he says it's a convergent series of infinite numbers where everything slows down before reaching him. And he can amplify limitless or infinity to a negative neutral number and create this imaginary apple, right? This imaginary apple that sucks you into a space and it makes it to where you can't get too close to himself. But he can't really amplify the technique too much because if he does it while it's too close to him, then we get like what happens with Mei Mei and Urahime in the last episode, and it makes everything blow up. It becomes a black hole and it warps and it does bad things, right? And then when he tries to use the red technique, the Aka, he's using divergence, and it's the divergence of infinity, which means drawing it apart. But here's the thing. I'm an English teacher, but I was like, divergence, I was like, neutral negative numbers, a series of infinite numbers. I'm like, I'm an English teacher. What are all these terms? Like, what is this? And so I just typed in, before I started this discussion, infinite numbers, convergence, and limitless negative. You know what this is? This is effing calculus. What? What? This is calculus. The idea of determining convergence and diversion of infinite series is a freaking property of calculus. Gojo in the last episode was explaining fucking Digimon, and now he's using calculus? What? I was like, my brain can't do it. No, that's the wrong side of Romania Black's brain. It can't do it. Nope. So if you were expecting this reactor to explain what infinite numbers and the convergence divergence series of limitless neutral negative numbers are, I'm sorry. This girl maxed out at pre-calc. We can't go on to calculus. That's beyond me. But I'm just so floored that adds an entire another layer to Gojo's character that he was explaining in the last episode. He was using Digimon as a way to explain the plot, but yet one of his 2 curse techniques involves the properties of calculus. Good sir. What? I'm just floored. I don't know what to do with him. I don't know what to do with Gojo Satoru. He is a very ridiculous character, and no wonder Gege hates him. He's like, I know, I've made him this complicated thing. I don't know what to do with him either. But that just explains how difficult Gojo is to mess with because of how strong he is and how insane his powers are. So he's a prodigy. Gojo is literally a prodigy. And Getou, on the converse end, is not a prodigy. He just happens to have a technique that is very, very useful. So what do we do with that? I love the idea that Gojo and Getou are 2 insanely OP characters, but Getou just has a very, very powerful technique that's disgusting, and Gojo's a prodigy. It's just like, what the hell? The strongest in the world. I'm like, and he tries to use red and it fails. And just like the glee on his face. There is something too about Gojo using this technique where he just takes so much like pride and glee in trying to use the powers that he's been born with. And it's like, oh my God, it's absolutely fascinating. Which means I wonder if that's why he kind of connects to Yuta, because Yuta has these crazy curse techniques and Gojo's like, oh, I know what that's like. You know, kind of understands similarly. You know, and maybe the same way he views Megumi as well. I also want to note that it now makes sense. I was questioning in the last episode why Gojo wants to protect his eyes. It makes sense now if his eyes, if he has to use the 6 eyes, if it involves him using his doll-like eyes to see people and see their powers, it would explain why he doesn't want his eyes injured and why he keeps them covered, but also that he can use his eyes like x-ray vision maybe beyond the cloth. Maybe the cloth is really breathable and he can see through it. It's interesting. But yeah, it makes more sense why he's trying to protect his eyes now, because he uses them for a curse technique. I'm so fascinated, right? And then we manage to get away from the clones, and we find out the clone guy, and we find out that Kuroi has been kidnapped. But then what happened to Getou? She was with Getou, so where is he? He and her were together, so how did she get kidnapped? And where's Getou? And we still have not seen Nanami or the other boy at all. So, what? This is Hidden Inventory 2, so I'm wondering if we'll get a Hidden Inventory 3. I don't really watch the previews, so we'll see. But Daddy Fushiguro and Gojo, and the compare and contrast between the two of them fascinates me to no end. I am so riveted by the two of their characters. And I didn't think, like, Gojo in season 1, I was just like, oh, he's the OP mentor. Of course, he's Urahara from Bleach. He's Kakashi from Naruto. He's the two of them combined, right? And he's a little bit of Shigure from Fruits Baskets in him. And I was just like, okay, he's the OP mentor, whatever. And now these 2 episodes are making me go, okay, there's something else there, and I want to know what it is. And then Daddy Fushiguro, it is only a matter of time, y'all, until that shirt comes off. Until he has the OP outfit. I'm curious why he switches from that to the OP outfit. Maybe that's when he gets serious. But yeah, I'm so fascinated. Obviously, please no spoilers, but I'm so curious to know your comments down below. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I've already got my cosplay ready for next week. It'll be very exciting, and I hope you all are ready. So I'll see you then with more Jujutsu Kaisen. Bye!